Before a single movie camera ever rolled in Hollywood, the American West was already a work of fiction. Its authors weren't the pioneers or cowboys living the life, but storytellers in city offices and showmen like Buffalo Bill who packaged that life for a mass audience. They treated the frontier like a product, developing formulas for blood and thunder action stories that sold by the tens of thousands to a public hungry for adventure. Hollywood inherited this ready-made mythology and simply amplified it on a global scale. The classic Western movie wasn't a misinterpretation of history. It was the final perfection of a product designed for maximum entertainment and profit. If you enjoy separating the real history from the Hollywood fantasy, do us a favor by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Now let's deconstruct the foundational lies of the cinematic West. Lie number 1, the High Noon Quick-Draw Duel. It's the most iconic scene in any Western. Two men, one good, one evil, facing off on a deserted street. Hands hovering over their holsters. In a flash of steel and smoke, the hero proves he's not just faster, but that he's in the right. It's the ultimate test of skill and nerve. Except it almost never happened. The classic face-to-face quick-draw duel is a Hollywood invention designed for maximum drama. Real gunfights in the Old West were nothing like this clean, honorable contest. They were messy, brutal, and almost always fought at very close range. More often than not, a gunfight was an ambush. It was one man shooting another from a hidden spot or even in the back. Or it was the sudden, violent end to a drunken argument in a saloon. The goal wasn't a fair fight. It was to end the other man's life as quickly as possible. Even the famous Wild Bill Hickok wasn't killed in a duel. He was shot in the back of the head while playing poker. The one time history gives us something close to a duel was between Hickok and a man named Davis Tutt in 1865. But even that wasn't like the movies. They stood 75 yards apart, a true test of marksmanship, not just speed. They stood sideways in a classic dueling stance. Tutt drew first and missed. Hickok calmly drew his pistol, rested it on his other arm to steady his aim, and fired one fatal shot. It was an act of calculated marksmanship, not a lightning-fast draw from the hip. The idea of the quick draw was more about being quick to anger than quick with a gun. Lie number 2, the wild, lawless town. Think of a movie town like Tombstone or Dodge City. What do you see? Chaos, constant brawls spilling out of saloons, and shootouts on the main street every day. A single, brave sheriff is usually the only thing standing between the good folk and total anarchy. The historical record tells a completely different story. Those famous cattle towns were often places of surprisingly strict order, especially when it came to guns. The town leaders knew that chaos was bad for business. They wanted to attract families and investors, not gunfighters. So, what did they do? They passed gun control laws. In towns like Dodge City and Tombstone, signs were posted at the town limits, telling visitors they had to check their firearms at the sheriff's office or a local hotel. It wasn't a suggestion, it was the law, and they enforced it. In fact, the most legendary gunfight in American history, the shootout at the OK Corral, was really a dispute over this very issue. Virgil Earp, as city marshal, along with his brothers and Doc Holliday, were trying to enforce Tombstone's law against carrying guns in town. The Clantons and McClorys refused to disarm, and that led directly to the fight. It wasn't an act of lawlessness, it was a violent act of law enforcement. And the idea of daily bloodshed, not even close. In the 5 biggest Kansas cattle towns, there were a total of just 45 homicides over a 15-year period. That's less than 1 murder per town per year. Even Tombstone, in its most violent year, only saw 5 people killed, and 3 of them were at the OK Corral. These towns had justice systems, marshals and sheriffs, all working to impose order, not embrace chaos. Lie number 3, the cowboy's life of adventure. In the movies, the cowboy is the ultimate free spirit. He is a master of his environment, living by his own code in a world of thrilling adventure and quiet strength. He's the central hero of the Western myth, a figure of rugged independence who answers to no one. The historical reality of the cowboy's life was anything but an adventure. The actual job was characterized by grueling physical labor, long stretches of pure monotony and loneliness, and extremely low pay. A typical workday lasted 15 hours, with most of that time spent in the saddle under a harsh sun, simply watching over cattle. For this relentless work, the pay was meager, averaging just $25 to $40 a month. After months of this grinding routine on the trail, cowboys would finally reach a cattle town. Their pent-up energy and pay often earned them a reputation for being rowdy, drunken, and disorderly, and they were sometimes banned from local businesses. The romantic life of adventure was a fiction. The reality was a tough, dirty, and poorly paid job. Lie number 4, the savage Indian attack. It's one of the most famous scenes in all of cinema. A wagon train of hopeful pioneers suddenly surrounded by whooping warriors on horseback. The settlers circle the wagons and make a desperate last stand. It's a terrifying image, and it became a staple of the Western, showing pioneers under constant threat from a hostile wilderness. For the hundreds of thousands of people who traveled the Oregon and California trails, the truth of what they feared was very different. The greatest killers on the trail were not Native Americans. They were disease and accidents. By a huge margin, the #1 killer was disease. Cholera was the worst. It was a waterborne illness that spread easily in the poor sanitary conditions of the trail. Diaries from the time tell horrifying stories of people who were perfectly healthy at breakfast and buried by noon. It's estimated that disease was responsible for up to 10 graves for every mile of the trail. The second leading cause of death was accidents. Many pioneers were inexperienced with firearms, and fatal shootings were tragically common. Even more common was being run over by the heavy wheels of a wagon. Drowning during river crossings also claimed countless lives. Violent conflict with Native Americans was statistically one of the least likely ways for a pioneer to die. In fact, most interactions were peaceful and based on trade. Pioneers often relied on native expertise for food, directions, and help crossing dangerous rivers. The West was not an empty land, but the home of hundreds of distinct native nations, and the myth of the constant savage attack simply doesn't hold up to the historical facts. Lie number 5, the Grand Saloon Brawl. A hero walks into a saloon. Somebody says the wrong thing, and suddenly the whole place erupts. Fists are flying, chairs are being smashed over backs, and someone always gets thrown through a big glass window. All while the piano player keeps hammering out a tune. It's a classic Western scene, full of action and mayhem. But just think about it from a business perspective. Saloons were often the most expensive, well-furnished buildings in a frontier town. Owners invested huge sums of money in long, ornate bars, expensive mirrors shipped from the East, and a full stock of liquor and glassware. A room-clearing brawl that shatters all that expensive property would be an economic disaster. Saloon owners were businessmen. They had every reason to keep order and stop fights before they could escalate. The idea that they would tolerate weekly brawls is just not logical. When violence did happen in a saloon, it was usually quick and deadly. A dispute was far more likely to be settled with a knife or a single gunshot, not a long, drawn-out fistfight. The bartender, who was often armed with a shotgun for just such an occasion, would have put a stop to it immediately. The Grand Saloon Brawl is a lie created for the movies. It's a way to show the hero is tough without the serious consequences of a deadly gunfight. Lie number 6, the infallible gunslinger's dead-eye aim. The movie Gunslinger is a true artist with his revolver. He can shoot a pistol out of a man's hand, sever a hangman's noose from 100 paces, or shoot the cap off a bottle without breaking the glass. His aim is perfect, an extension of his will. The real firearms of the 19th century were not precision instruments. A Colt revolver could be accurate if you aimed it slowly and deliberately at a stationary target. But in the chaos of a real fight, accuracy went out the window. And there's a key detail Hollywood always forgets: black powder. The ammunition of the day produced a huge cloud of thick, white smoke every time a gun was fired. After the very first shot, a gunfighter's view of his target would be almost completely blocked. In an exchange of fire, the air would quickly fill with smoke, making aimed shots nearly impossible. Let's go back to the OK Corral. 9 experienced men, firing an estimated 30 shots at each other from just a few feet away. In that 30-second storm of lead, only 3 men were killed. The high number of misses, even at point-blank range, shows just how hard it was to hit a target under stress. The myth of the dead-eye gunslinger turns the hero into a legend, but the reality of the weapons he used made that kind of superhuman accuracy pure fantasy. Lie number 7, the dashing romantic outlaw life. In the movies, outlaws like Jesse James or Billy the Kid are often charming rebels. They are anti-heroes fighting a corrupt system, stealing from the rich railroads and bankers, and living a life of high adventure. This romantic image is almost entirely a creation of the dime novels that were popular back east. Publishers took the names of real, often vicious criminals and spun them into heroic legends for a public hungry for tales of adventure. The actual life of an outlaw on the frontier was brutal, squalid, and short. It was a life of constant hiding in harsh conditions, with little food and the constant fear of betrayal or a violent death. Big daylight bank robberies and dramatic train heists were incredibly rare and seldom successful. Most outlaws were desperate men involved in petty crimes like horse stealing. Their careers usually ended quickly, either at the hands of a posse or at the end of a rope. The myth of the dashing outlaw was a fantasy sold to people living in cities, an escape into a world of freedom that never really existed. So there you have it, the quick-draw duel, the lawless town, the infallible gunslinger, all powerful myths that have shaped our vision of the American West. But as we've seen, the reality was far more complex and in many ways far more interesting. It was a time and place defined by surprising truths, where wild towns had strict gun laws, where the greatest danger on the trail was disease, and where the real job of a cowboy was grueling, low-paid labor. To look past the Hollywood myths isn't to diminish the West. It's to discover the real story of the diverse people who struggled to build lives in a time of incredible change. A story that is far richer than anything on the silver screen. Which of these Hollywood lies surprised you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.